So thank you, everyone. Can you all hear all right? So it's lovely for me to be here chatting to Claire. I think she's possibly unusual in this room in that, I write about the environment. There are a lot of academics here who collect figures about the environment and study what's going on in the environment, but Claire has done things about the environment.
With your data.
Yeah, with your data. And hopefully with the help of the media highlighting things. We catch her between petitioning Macron and chatting to various different French media outlets. She's been being texted just now about an oil spill off Corsica. But she is here to talk to us about what she's done, and I think more importantly about what we can do to help make the Anthropocene as pleasant for everyone and indeed for the planet. And I think it'd be nice to start about why you're here and how you ended up being in this position, and I guess having a slight Damascene...
I should ask this woman.
Well, specifically here, but also, yes, you caught a plane or took the Eurostar and found your way here. But why is it that you are a keynote speaker here talking to us about the environment? How did you end up...
caught up in this mess?
Yeah, caught up in this mess.
I wonder. So hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here. It doesn't look like it's going to be the best day to visit York because we have a planned, sort of meeting and day of activity. So not much of a touristic activity for me, but really happy to be talking to the Yorkers. Is that how we call people from York? I don't know how I got. So basically Bloom, I don't know if you know of Bloom, it's a very small NGO with reasonable impact. We're specialized in marine conservation, and we look at living things. And we wish we could do non-living things. For example, we wish we could actually spend human resources and time looking at deep-sea mining, for example, but for resource constraints, we cannot. So we really have quite a specialty in looking at fishing, overfishing, destructive fisheries, and with the help of some scientists, especially Callum Roberts, we've managed to have a few victories. One of them was we managed to get deep sea bottom trawling banned in the EU below 800 meters, and that was very deep, but that was better than keep on trawling on a business as usual routine up to 2,000 meters. And of course, the UK was instrumental in this because lots of deep sea bottom trawling, most of it actually occurs in Scottish waters and in the UK. So it was very important actually to work with data, with scientists, and to get the EU to agree to a ban on a deep sea on a fishing technique, which is extremely destructive. And that was, yeah, thank you. That was in 2016, and it took 8 years. And of course, we didn't do it alone. But France was the biggest opponent to a ban in the EU. So we did it with colleagues, especially, I have to quote Matthew Gianni, who's an American former fisherman who became an environmentalist. And we really worked very hard to try to convince European institutions. And France was the biggest opponent because we have a deep sea fleet, which trawls the hell out of your background garden, marine garden, on a daily routine with the Spaniards. And they didn't want to know anything about changing their business model. And of course, there was it's a very small industry. It's a very small line of business to do deep sea fishing. But just because you had a few industrial boats that had reach within, political spheres, there was a complete blockage. And it took 8 years working night and day, beyond reason, to get this done. Meanwhile, the EU was doing other nasty things. I'm not here to convince you that it was a good thing to vote for Brexit, because I think the EU is a mess and it needs to be fixed. I don't think leaving it, of course, that has to be said, of course, because I think it is a mess and we need to say it's a mess. And so once we've said it, then we have to work at, on fixing it. But it is a mess. And we are a small team. And so it took all our resources. We're actually 3 girls during those almost 8 years of lobbying and doing so many other things to get this ban to go through. And meanwhile, the EU was also reopening the can of worms to do electric fishing. So while we're focusing on getting deep-sea bottom trawl banned, the EU, at the end of 2006, reauthorized to practice the electrocution of marine life. So there's always something happening in your back while you're focusing on something is such a big machinery that it's really hard to watch everything that's going. So we went straight from, once we got deep-sea bottom trawl banned with our colleagues from the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition and so on, I was thinking, okay, that's it. I mean, I was toasted. I was so tired. And I thought, okay, and everybody was like, now you've done it, you can actually rest. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And of course, a week later, I broke my arm because I was so tired. I played tennis and I couldn't, and I broke my arm. So I spent the summer, my only summer with a rest, with a cast in a really hot weather. And just when I sort of went back to normal life in September, somebody said, electric fishing, you heard about that? I'm like, no, what's that now? And so we looked, and it was like so disgusting. So we spent so many months actually doing background research because we're science-based. So we do, before we speak publicly, we investigate the file just to know where we can go, what we can say. Because we think, even when you have the data, and you would know, even when you have solid data, it's very hard to convince policymakers to do anything. But if you don't have data, you've got lobbies right in there saying, what is that figure? You haven't checked it, and that's it. And they have much more power and influence and money and personnel and whatever. So we cannot afford to get it wrong, not once. So there was only one question.
Well, let's go back to 2008. So you had this 8-year journey to ban the deep-sea trawling. Yeah. What was it that, there were many things that were wrong in the world. What was it that made you choose that? What were you doing at the time, and why did you think, right, this is the one that I'm going to pick?
Well, the thing is, sometimes I answer, I don't think I chose anything. I felt more I was chosen because I was doing wildlife filmmaking. And I was filming a series which then aired on Discovery Channel, and it was about what animals do at night. And so, of course, when we went into the marine world, we had to look at how they cope with darkness, eternal darkness. So we went to the deep sea. The only place in the world that had a decent exhibition on the deep was the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. So I went there, we filmed. And then started talking to scientists, of course, and I had been doing wildlife filming everywhere around the world, and I had already realized that if you want to film a gibbon, you have to talk with a gibbon specialist that's going to take you to the, a bit of jungle where there are some gibbons left, and then you want to film hornbills, and you have to talk to the hornbill specialist that tells you this is the patch of forests where there's 6 pairs left. You're like 6 mating pairs left of rhinoceros hornbills. Is that what it is? So I already knew, whoa, the world is in trouble. But when I went into it felt that all these scientists, whether it be academics or NGOs, BirdLife International, it felt like mammals had, activists that were mobilized to support them. True birds or whatever. I mean, not that they were winning the battles against the destruction of the environment, but at least there were people that were actually very mobilized. Where when I went into the deep sea and I was talking to these scientists and they showed me the footage of destruction, I mean large-scale destruction of bottom trawlers, wiping out ecosystems, thousands of years old, without anyone doing anything about it, that's when I was like, okay, that needs to stop. And also there was this figure that really misled me into thinking I could do anything. And it was a report by Matt Gianni, who said, basically, he had written that 285 trawlers internationally were destroying the environment in the deep ocean worldwide. And I thought, 285, that's fine. I can deal with that. Let's just get that, sort of like ticked and move on. But of course, then I realized that even one industrial ship, one of them, that has invested some sort of capital is going to fight, tooth and nail, just to make sure that that money is not taken back somehow. So, of course, 285, that was actually a bunch of fleets. And they put up a really nasty fight, you know.
Tell us about that. So you've decided on your cause. You've got the data that says you're destroying these 1,000-year-old ecosystems. You believe it's even a winnable goal. This is a manageable chunk that you're trying to deal with. And then you start going at it. What happens?
It's a bit like, I thought, you know, eventually when I'm now looking back at my, how my awareness of how the world really works, how it operated, it feels like being stuck in a tsunami, which I was, and you understand things slowly. First you're like, oh, this massive thing is happening right next to me. And then you go to the beach next door, and then you realize, oh my God, lots of dead people here. But there are some people who are still alive, you know. And so your understanding of how bad the situation is goes through stages, and you feel so slow. In hindsight, you feel like, I'm so stupid. There were like 300,000 people who died, you know. And I was like trying to, you know, I was saying, let's get this corpse back to the beach because people need to have the corpse of people they loved, you know, able to do a proper mourning, you know. And you're like, oh, but then actually there's this guy with the bone that's sticking out, and he's, you know. And so you're so sluggish at understanding things, and that's how I was with understanding the reality of the world. I mean, at first I thought, hey, you know, politics, international politics, I speak many languages, I can do that, yeah. And then you're like, oh, okay, diplomats, very cynical, absolutely not mobilized. They're you know, all right, so it's not that easy. And then you go, okay, we had a multi-stakeholder consultation in France, and I thought this is a great opportunity to try to do something and mobilize. And so I counted on scientists. There was a scientist that was a rapporteur of this multi-stakeholder consultation, and we proposed the ban on deep sea bottom trawling. And I counted on scientists, and like, for me, science, you know, it's like, my God, in life, you know, there's nothing more beautiful than our endeavor, our mental endeavor to try to understand the world, describe it. I think it's like magical. That's the best thing that a human mind can do. But then you realize some of the scientists are seriously corrupt. And in France, we have a bunch of those, right? And fishery science is steered politically. So you have people who you think obviously are going to be, one, rational, two, they're going to source what they say, and three, of course, be honest, they're scientists, you know. Can you imagine how stupid I was, right? So that took years to fight. I mean, my own naiveness, I don't know how you say. I was so naive, and it took all that time to understand that, you know, it takes understanding how cynical politics is or are to be able to fight them, understanding some scientists are extremely corrupt to see them. Now I can see them right away. I can detect them.
What was corrupting them? What was corrupting the process? Because it feels like you're arguing for something that's so self-evidently good. Yeah, I'm not sure how one even makes the opposing case. Oh, I represent this industrial-scale trawler. I don't know how that goes down well.
Well, yeah, I know, it's crazy. But then I read a paper by Daniel Pauly that I assume you know, which is called Beyond Duplicity and Ignorance in Fisheries, I think, which is a great paper. If you haven't read it, you have to read it. And I was like, wow, that's my experience, you know. It's just that science is steered politically. And so we have our Ministry of Fisheries, which is funding the production of expertise in fisheries science. And so there's a very strict and clear, let's say, roadmap to what you can talk about and what you cannot touch on. And so it's very protective of industrials, right? Industrial practice, industrial stakes. And so I found out, digging into, because I was so puzzled that these bunch of scientists were being so corrupt. And I looked into it, and it was awful for me the day where we had to set out a press release saying that scientist, the rapporteur, is corrupt. It felt like I was betraying my own beliefs, my own family. But that's what it took, because then I realized, like the IFREMER, our French Research Institute, you know, under the pressure of industrial players, which had overfished massively at the end of the 80s, right, the traditional fish stocks, they had to either reduce capacity, convert to different fishing gears, or they had to go expand into deeper waters, further waters for new species, right, the triple expansion. And they, of course, put pressure on public authorities to make sure that they would take our research capacities to look for new fishing grounds, which they did. And so you realize that the person who's supposed to arbitrate between, let's say, civil society on one side and the industry on the other, so the science is actually very biased because they're a part of that process. Public authorities are under the pressure of industrial groups. Why? Because small-scale fishers, which are not perfect, absolutely not, but they're the best hope for sustainable fisheries, they are not represented politically. So policymakers, public authorities have in their ear all day long just one version of the story, one production of sets of data all day long. So even if they were, politicians are politicians, right? So of course they should know better, and they probably know that what they're getting is not exactly what they could make the extra, take the extra step to go and look for proper data, but they don't. And they have no time or whatever, maybe it's comfortable for them. And those small-scale fishers just are not represented. So they're bulldozed, just like the deep sea is.
So what did you do? You won. You were up against this tsunami of corrupt forces, and you achieved your goal.
Yeah, I first lost all my friends. No, because I did. Because at first I was like, oh, the little French journalist that made that book about the deep sea, and it was. I made my book about the deep sea with the University of Chicago Press, which is a very good publisher in the U.S. and so everybody was like, wow, a French girl who speaks English. And seriously, who can speak to American scientists, Japanese scientists, whatever? She makes a book, and so everybody in France was like, "Oh, so proud! This is our, she's a woman, good for quotas. She's young, excellent for quotas. She can do media, all of that." And then you're nice, everybody loves you, your book is great, da 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 da. And then one day you're like, "Okay, deep sea bottom trawling is really bad, and that scientist is corrupt," and people go. And they stop inviting you from one day to the next. So your old support network just simply disappears. So I went through, I'm not going to make you cry, but I went through years of total solitude. I was just, and we didn't have the support of the, let's say, citizens yet, right? Because we're so small. We didn't have outreach capacity yet. But I started producing data. Now we have great scientists, but in those days, I used just investigative skills, to just look for the subsidies they were getting and tell that untold, financial story, and that really hit some scores. Let's say with the media, there was an era for new data, right? That was our hook, and it's always been how we operate. And so I left my old friends and my old networks and supporters and discovered that, yes, you can have citizens that support you, and you can even have scientists that support you, but they're just not the same groups. And so that transition was really just like a GNU going through, the Serengeti waters with crocodiles and not very friendly. But it took, perseverance. What's the secret story to anything? Perseverance. Everybody knows this in terms of accumulating the data. What you do, you won't get series. You won't get a picture if you don't keep grinding, keep digging, perseverance. That's what there's not that many young kids here, but that's what I try to tell kids, drop your screens, and learn perseverance. My daughter says on the piano, "Oh, it's so frustrating," and I'm like, yes, that's good for you. Keep on doing it.
But then, so you persevered, but in terms of the tools you used, you organized quite an effective boycott, didn't you?
We did everything that could be done. Everything. I think what made us really win at the end of the day was really data. It was just to first fight the opaque system that was organized by the French industry with the complicity of public authorities and science. It was to bring back the science, back in the light of the media, to tell them, no, there's that many publications that show that deep water sharks don't recover for a long time, even if you stopped fishing them, the deep sea corals, so bringing all this, using data all the time. And then using new data, i.e. producing stuff with looking at data sets that nobody had looked into, asking the government, can you give us the subsidy data? And they would go, sorry, can we have the subsidy data? And it's been years, by the way. We're still 10 years after we started, we still don't have the subsidy data from the French government. Hello, this is democracy for you. And so you go look for stuff that nobody wants to give you, and so that gives us a full vision of that. And that's what made us, I think, at the end of the day, made us win. We showed that not only were they destroying a common heritage that took thousands of years to grow and you can wipe out in an instant, which is completely delirious, but also they were doing it without producing wealth. They were not even producing wealth because with the subsidies that we were giving them, it was costing us. So the only and that really didn't go down too well. That was picked up, And then, of course, there was a French comic strip illustrator who made a comic strip that went viral. And everything we had done was supposed to be viral. Like, wow, this is so good, it's going to go viral. Pff, nothing. And the only thing we told that girl, she said, can I do your TED talk about deep sea bottom trawling? Can I do a strip? I was like, why not? I was working night and day. I didn't have time to pick up my sheet. It's crazy. I could not even tell you what my life was like, so miserable and stupid. And, but working night and day until 2, 3 in the morning, and then waking up at 6 because I had a baby, and I was bringing my baby up on my own, and then going back to, back to work. So I did this for over and over and over. So this young, very famous woman in France said, can I help with an illustration? I was like, sure. I didn't even see her mail for 8 months. And then somebody rang me and said, this woman is really well-known. She's trying to connect with you. Can you please look at your emails? I said, I have too many. I pick and choose, right? And so I said, yeah, do whatever you want. She did it. I just proofread that it was not incorrect. And that went viral, 600,000 shares. So of course our server went bust. And that was just, of course, our server was meant to have maybe 50 clicks in a day. And all of a sudden you have 100,000 clicks in a few hours. So the whole thing went bust. Our website went blackout. And that was just a week or almost before there was a vote in the European Parliament. So I was basically living night and day in the Parliament trying to reach the brains of our MEPs. But that really helped with the numbers of signatures. Nonetheless, we lost the vote in the Parliament, which was crazy, right? So you've got all your perfect biological data. You've got all your perfect financial data. Everything is wrong. Deep sea bottom trawling is just a bad idea from the old world. Drop it, move on. And yet, MEPs voted in favor of continuing to deep sea bottom trawl. And at that moment, that's where I lost hope. That was on the 10th of December, 2013. I went home and I was seriously depressed for so long. And I would wake up in the morning and think, okay, maybe the best thing is that I throw my baby in the Seine River and then I jump. Seriously, I was so dark. I was thinking humanity is screwed. If with data, it's not there were years, remember years where climate skeptics were making us believe it was not anthropogenic. Remember those years, which are now over, thank God, but there was not even a debate on deep sea bottom trawling. There was no way you could be in favor of deep sea bottom trawling, right? And yet the Parliament voted for it. I was like, I'm throwing the sponge at this.
Why were they? Why was the MEP for Poland West voting for deep sea bottom trawling?
Because they had lobbies telling them jobs were at stake, which was completely untrue. That there were no alternatives and and they had more reach. They had more people. They had a lot more money. We were 3 girls, so we were working night and day. We had colleagues from Pew and the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, but altogether, really, we're 7 or 8 to cover 766 MEPs in those days. Seriously, even if we did work night and day, and we did collapse, ended up in hospital, of course, what else, Because it's just inhumane. Can you say it's not possible to do it. And the fact that in their heart, in their mind, they voted for it, really just opened that huge sort of ocean of moral corruption right there before us. And I was like, you know what, humans are just sick.
So this is the beginning of the 3rd act of the film, I guess. You're at your lowest point. Could you take us to the happy ending?
So the thing is, I went on a 1-week vacation, which I hadn't done for years. And I did not work for 1 week, which I had never done. And I dropped my computer, all of that, for 1 week, in just 1 week. Actually, I was like, okay, now let's go back to the fight. So actually then I realized that sleeping helps, and it is important because I just really thought I could do whatever I wanted with my sleep. And of course, the body reminded me that no, not exactly, but it took some years. And so I just went back into the fight, and I thought, okay, politics is politics. It's not over until it's over. So let's just fight until the end. And I kept bugging them on a daily basis, fought on every single, did you say that in a match, like on a ball, you fight for every ball, right? Because otherwise you may lose your match. So I fought for every ball. And do you know Ashoka, the network of social entrepreneurs? You don't know Ashoka? It's actually US, and it's actually more Anglo-Saxon than it is French at all. It's a great network of social entrepreneurs. They're the ones who coined the term, actually, social entrepreneurship. And they said, we can help you. Because, of course, I was totally broke. I forget to say, this is 13 years of my doing this for free as a volunteer for Bloom. And so my book had sold well, but I had gone through all my savings, and I had my baby, and I had, of course, had to change. I lived in a very tiny little Parisian, very cute little room, and with the baby, I had to move to a bigger part, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I was like, I'm broke. I also have to go tend tables because I just have to serve pizzas to survive, right? So all of that, and Ashoka stepped in and said, we can help. With money, I was like, yes, and that actually really, that helped. And Pew, the Pew Charitable Trust, also told me we can support you. So they gave me like a consultant contract. So materially, I was able to survive, which was great, and therefore keep on fighting. So we did keep on fighting, and we kept on fighting, and we eventually, I think that's just the morality of the story is that perseverance pays off. I mean, it's not glamorous, it's not new, right? It's like, oh, you're waiting for something, well, secret. No, nothing secret, it's just perseverance.
And so the morality of the story for scientists, I think a lot of scientists see view their position within this ecosystem as the people who give people like you the data, and it's important for that data to be uncorrupted often by their own views. I think a lot of climate scientists would say I'm not a campaigner, I am a scientist. What's your view on that?
Okay, my view. This is my message. My only takeaway, kind of take-home message is that the world is, even though I heard that you had a talk, which is great, about animals which are adapting to climate change globally, as you've seen from the IPCC report this morning, we're really en route to collapse. 15,000 scientists, I suppose some of you signed the warning to humanity last year. We're on trajectory to collapse. So we really need to step out of our safety zone, and neutrality is not at all an option anymore. And people listen to scientists. So we take your data, we convey it to policymakers. It makes a bigger impact if it's scientists. So I really welcome when I see, that, for example, this warning to humanity, 15,000 scientists coming together to tell us, end of the game here. Yeah, this is really bad. I think that really has an impact. I mean, does it really lead to Macron doing the right thing? Of course not. But, then at least people wake up and they realize that no political instances are not fit for picking up that message and taking all the solutions that exist and transforming policies. But at least it's preparing the ground for some political awakening or some citizen movements or something. So we really need scientists to lobby with us. And even with you, it's really hard. Most of our victories are not proper victories. It's more because we're there, we managed to avoid some really bad damage. But then you cannot claim, hey, we avoided, electric trolling at 2,000 meters of depth. People go, whoa, great. You just avoided that? That sounds really bad. It sounds stupid. Yeah, I know, but we avoided it. I mean, say thank you, please, Because but most of our victories are just dark things of what you managed to avoid. They're not things that you can claim, like deep-sea bottom trawling. We can claim that, it's great. But we don't have that many things that we can really claim in a really positive spin, you know, we stopped it, you know, but on a daily basis, we managed to stop a lot of damage from happening.
On that, I think we should, the challenges and opportunities in the Anthropocene. We're going to have a panel discussion now, and if the panel can come up, and then there's going to be a chance for you guys to ask questions, for all of them, and particularly Claire, who I know has a lot of other things that she'd like to say.
Right, okay, so I'm from the Department of Politics. I'm a professor of development politics, and I'm also the director of the Interdisciplinary Global Development Centre. So I guess I'm here in my capacity as somebody who thinks about politics and policy, and also somebody who thinks about development. And so I would say three things quickly. I would say, if I can, that very provocatively, I think, that it's really time to put more research funding into understanding the politics and the policy processes of climate change, as well as the scientific challenges. And I think Claire's talk, Claire's testimony really, as well as the report of the IPCC today, is just illustrative of that. The challenges are not in terms of evidence, the challenges are in terms of policy. And within that, I think we need to shift out of thinking just about rational self-interest and to think about the power of ideas. I could say more about that perhaps later. Secondly, I'd like to say something very, very quickly about development. The idea of development is fundamentally shaped by the notion that really you just replicate the processes of industrialisation that occurred in the UK and more widely in Europe, and we just replicate that process. And that's an idea that, you know, it's an idea whose time has come and gone. At the same time, so we need to change what we mean about development, what it means. But at the same time, I think we also need to recognise that that outmoded idea of development as industrialisation, as consumption, as modernity, has actually brought a huge amount of benefit. And not just benefits to the UK and the developed world, but huge benefits to the developing world. And if we understand that, we might also understand some of the resistance to change. And thirdly, and very, very quickly, I'd say geopolitics matters. And what that actually means is that the global south and the east matter, because power has shifted. It's shifted away from the west, whether we like it or not. And the challenges of bringing global south voices in, and the voices of the BRICS, is a really big one. If we just look around here, you know, in our own conversations here today, we haven't got much in the way of voices other than Western voices. So how are we going to get those voices into the conversation? If we don't get them into the conversation, we won't get them into international agreements. If we don't get them into international agreements, agreements won't work. And that's the challenge that the IPCC faces as well. So I'll stop there.
Mark, what does a historian bring to this?
Okay, well, my name is Mark Jenner, and you know, by profession, I'm a historian of the 16th to the 18th century, and so I always feel a little uncomfortable talking about the contemporary, let alone the future. But one of the things, you know, the core of my research is the history of pollution. You know, both the environmental history of pollution, particularly in terms of urban living, but also in terms of the definition, the framing, the construction of what counts as pollution. And I find it really fascinating, for instance, that all the presentations so far have been so incredibly namby-pamby about greenhouse gas emissions. You know, why are we actually using this particular language and avoiding languages such as pollution? It's very interesting that Alistair, for instance, was happy to talk about, we talked about pollution when we're thinking about things going into the into river systems, water systems. But actually when we start thinking about a global dimension, actually the language of pollution has fallen out. And I find that very interesting. But it's also indicates, you know, one of the things that I'm also is University Research Champion for Culture and Communication. And I've been very struck by the ways in which and something that my work keeps coming back to, is how we draw the boundary between nature and culture, or the boundary which several presentations gave today between science and culture. And I think Claire has shown very eloquently just how far various political and cultural factors are imbricated into and indeed fund various sorts of scientific research. And it seems to me, you know, the consequence of that is actually for us to start thinking in a much more integrated, much more tangled up way about how we might start thinking about humans and natural processes interacting. And it's partly for that I really do not like the term the Anthropocene. I think the Anthropocene...
Right, let's go, guys.
I think the Anthropocene, precisely because it puts it all at the level of humanity, actually doesn't talk sufficiently about the power and politics that Richard's presentation mentioned, that Jean has highlighted. There are a whole variety of other kinds of terms, you know, the Capitalocene, which really doesn't trip off the tongue and doesn't have the kind of fancy Greek root. But it does seem to me that we've got to start thinking about which particular groups, historically and now, that actually are really driving climate change through consumption and production. And to dissent from Chris, I don't think that we need mass suicide of humanity. We just need the right half of humanity to commit, because they are the ones who are consuming.
Wow.
Gaia, do you have anything to add to that? Introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Gaia Vince. You've heard me talk, presumably, already, so I won't go on too much longer, except to say that it's true that historically most of the carbon dioxide going in the atmosphere that is causing this problem has come from the north, from our economies, but this is very rapidly changing. And as other countries follow our model, you know, we can't separate that. I don't think the name. Anyway, I'm not interested in the name, Anthropocene particularly, but I do think this is a problem for humanity as a whole, because partly because the number is important, the population is important, the consumption is important, obviously. The population is important, and why it's important, I think, mainly is because of the emergent properties of networks. Because there are so many of us, and because we are so networked, we're able to achieve a lot more than and a lot faster than we were before, which is why this is happening so quickly. So the model that we've used, the cheap energy supply that we've used, and it's all to do with energy efficiency, that's producing this carbon dioxide and other pollutants. You know, there's plenty of other pollutants as well. You know, I think it can be changed. I think we can change that. I don't think it's easy, and I think people who rail and say, you know, why don't we just stop this? In some cases, you know, this is a tangible thing. Like deep sea trawling is something that, you know, there are only 200. I mean, and the battle that you faced for that is quite incredible. But there are only a set number of ships that are doing this. It's possible to stop that, although deep sea trawling is still going on, obviously, around the world. The same, you know, we can look to the Montreal Climate, the protocol that limited CFCs. You know, that was an extraordinary achievement, but again, that was a limited pollutant in a few industries. But even that was a great achievement. I think what we're trying to do here, we shouldn't underestimate just what an extraordinary thing it is that we're trying to do. And yet, countries like China are actually, while developing their economies, they are signing up to limit their pollutants. I mean, that's something that should give us, you know, inspiration. I think that's really quite extraordinary. And, you know, nobody intentionally decided what we want to do is dig up coal and then warm the atmosphere and cause, like, you know, storm surges that are going to drown villages. Nobody made that decision. So anyway, I'll stop talking now. So,
Chris.
So, yeah, I'm Chris Thomas, and apart from talking about some of the species that are responding to the Anthropocene, first of all, I'd like to start by defending the Anthropocene, because I think it does summarize that we are living in a world in which human-associated change is going to carry on. The choices we have are the directions and rates of change. It's not a change versus no change option on the tables. And because we can't unpick the humanity side of how the world has changed and the natural processes and the biological processes side of the world, well, of course, it's all biological processes because we are, but we can't unpick this, so it's not practical. So I think, for me, it helps focus the mind that it is a thing and a time in our planet's history that we're dealing with. And because that change is inevitable, that is why I think we have to look at the changes that are taking place that we as humans regard as positive things and not concentrate 100% on the changes that are negative. And there are lots of negative changes. I go down, and certainly in this university, actually in the world, as having written one of the most pressing ever scientific articles on impacts of climate change called Extinction Risk from Climate Change. And so I think it's critically important to recognize the really serious dangers and avoid completely and utterly stupid things of the type that you've described, where there's no sensible reason why we should be taking a particular course of action other than someone's parochial interest, which is against the interests of wider society. But I also think that given that change simply can't be stopped dead in its tracks, we should always be asking, how can we direct changes in ways that are actually going to improve the lot of people on this planet, even if the consequence of those changes is to make change happen slightly faster or in a different direction from what it would have done otherwise.
Finally,
okay, Thomas Krauss. I'm a physicist, so I'm a hard scientist, unlike this lot.
You mean a real scientist?
I didn't want to say that. So my interest in particular is photonics, laser physics, so I play around with lasers. In the context of this meeting, I'm interested in optical sensors for the environment for biomedical reasons. Now, I really believe that technology has a role to play in this debate. And in fact, Gaia showed us this morning some really simple technologies that these villagers had developed. If I may call that dumb technology, I think I should. And in the same context, we are involved in projects where we're trying to build water sensors in the South Pacific. So the challenge is to do something really well that's really simple. And as a physicist, we like to be reductionist. We like to find the most fundamental way of doing something. And I think, as a physicist, we have a role to play here. Although some of my colleagues prefer to make the most complicated machine ever invented, but that's a debate we have to have in the community. But I really think there's opportunity for physicists and engineers to build really simple, elegant solutions that can, if used responsibly, can help in this debate. So my second hat, I'm also strategy champion like Mark, in my case in technology. And here I'm interested in thinking, well, how can we use technology in agri-food, in food in general? I'm also sitting on the special interest group of the Institute of Physics on physics in food, which is about physics in food manufacturing. So it's at the other end of the supply chain, but nevertheless very relevant to this debate. I think that's enough.
Great. So, it's my goal that we're going to finish an academic meeting on time. So we have about 40 minutes for questions. I've got plenty of questions I can ask, but I'd rather hear from you guys. So, the gentleman in the pink shirt, I think we've got a roving mic. Have we got a roving? Yeah, the mic is roving.
Hello. Is it working? No. I'll speak very loudly. My name is Anthony Day from the Sustainable Futures Report, which is a podcast. And my question is, in 2006, the Stern Report said that if we start now, we can solve the climate crisis for no more than 1% of GDP. Today, 12 years on, the IPCC says if we start now, we can solve the climate crisis for only 2% of the global GDP. Do you think anybody will listen this time?
So for those who might not have heard at the back, the question was, in 2006, the Stern Report said that we could solve the global climate crisis for 1% of GDP. This time it said that the latest report says we can do it for 2% of GDP. Is anyone going to listen this time? Should we start? Because that definitely sounds like it's a political question as much as anything else. Jean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we've got to stop. We've got to stop assuming it's a problem that politicians don't listen, or that they're somehow stupid, or that our evidence just doesn't get through to them, or you know, the kind of the perverse explanations which just mean that we pit ourselves against them. There's them over there, and you know, with respect to Claire, we can think of them as corrupt, but maybe there are processes at work here that we need to start to unpick, and we need to understand much more why they evidently don't listen. You know, it was very evident that politicians didn't mobilise as one would have expected them to. And I think there are frameworks that can help us do that. And those frameworks are often found in actually in fields that are not climate science or climate change. You know, we can think about public policy, we can think about global public policy as a very standard framework for understanding policy, which is about interests, institutions and ideas. And we need to move away from thinking perhaps it's just rational self-interest, perhaps it's corruption, perhaps it's just special interest capture, perhaps it is all of those things. But we actually need to see what it is. We need to ask empirically what's going on, and we need to pursue that, because there is a real challenge. We can't just keep throwing out what is absolutely sound scientific evidence and saying, why isn't anybody listening? We're going to have to do some work to understand why they're not listening, I think.
Well, maybe I can build on that. There is an explanation which I think is important to bear in mind. There's a French scientist who published in English, good news. Her name is Keshe, so Julia Cage, but with an A, right? And she looked at the price of democracy, i.e. she looked at who funds politicians and political elections. And she looked at big democracies in the world. So she looked at the US and France and others, and she quantified for the first time. Great work, it took her years. She quantified that right-wing conservative parties were much richer, much more supported, much more funded than left-wing, labor-like, general interest-like parties. And there are different systems, fiscal systems, and political systems. So, for example, in France, a company cannot fund a candidate, but you can give out of your own money, and there is a tax deduction system. Whereas in the States, a company can fund a candidate, and so she looks at that capture that you've mentioned, and that is really scary, because it's just this trend where you can see it's really like the ancient regime, you know, before the French Revolution, where you can see the interest of a few is to keep your privileges, your domination, your financial interest, and to keep them sound and safe from sharing too much. And even Churchill had said, you know, democracy is about letting go a little bit, you know, so that people are kind of happy, keep them happy. So it's really about, you know, preserving what you have. And when you look at that, so you see the trends, and you look at what makes Trump win, it's money. What made Macron win is money. Also, of course, he had the threat of Le Pen, extreme right, in front of him, which really helped. I hope he loves her, because without Marine Le Pen, he would have never won. But just out of the money and he went into all the financial sector, especially the London French financial sector, London-based, Frankfurt, Paris, Hong Kong, and you name it. And he was massively funded. And that really makes a difference, because then you can see there is a capture. Because once you belong to your funders, then you do have to deliver. The program was, you know, make it easy for investors to come. You know, make the labor conditions very flexible, so corporations can come, invest, go away without all that social protection that they want to dump. So we're internationalizing really low labor standards, protection standards, when we should actually internationalize protection, right? Labor protection, you know, social health, all of that. But that's not what's happening. So she makes a very specific offer to really change the way we accept who funds politics. Because then it's very difficult for the general interest to even have a candidate. And now, because of, you know, and when you look at the Oxfam reports, you know, on who owns what, I mean, so I don't have the figures in mind, I definitely don't want to misquote them, but it's shocking that year after year, when they do their assessment yet again, you go from, let's say, I don't know, out of my brain, but really off the top of my head, but something like 60 families or something that own more than half of the world's wealth. And then the following year or a few years later, that's down to eight individuals that possess half of the world's wealth. There's something that shocking,
so it
right?
is, I'm going to disagree with you. Less strongly and strongly. I'm going to disagree with you quite strongly on that. I think that's one of the worst examples of political statistics used that I've seen. So they're right. It's something like, 10, 8, a few dozen, whatever, own as much as the bottom half of the world. The director of Oxfam owns more than the bottom 40% of the world combined. The reason that statistic works is because debt exists. And they've taken... So you cancel off all the people who are owning debt, and you end up with parity with about 40% of the world. So 40% of the world owns zero. And I don't think Oxfam should be using that statistic.
Okay, so let's forget Oxfam, and let's use Piketty. Do you agree with Piketty, his huge, massive work on capital?
Well, I haven't read it all. I don't think anyone has.
He was even invited to give talks all over the world, right? So Piketty showed that there was more inequity, you know, in belonging and in the fact that than there has ever been. So even under Louis XIV in France, which is, you know, the most authoritative and, you know, there were less gaps between the poorest and the richest as there are now, which is really quite shocking, right? So now there's 75% of capital is actually owned through inheriting it, whereas a few years before it was maybe 40%. So our chance of our, you know, sort of social elevator that can help us based on merit, based on work, is basically not working anymore. So we really have a problem with the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few that actually can put out and push out their candidates. Let alone, I mean, that you have another issue, which is mass surveillance linked to, as you would know with Cambridge Analytica, you can have interference based on the fact that we use Facebook and all of that, those social networks, and people can come in, use cognitive science to help us to steer us where they want us to be steered, which has happened with Trump and Peter Thiel, with Palantir. So are you aware of this, or am I completely speaking out? Because of course you were made, you know, you were of course made quite, it was a touchy issue, I think, this Cambridge Analytica, and it's still unclear, the links between Palantir and Cambridge Analytica. So no, we have an issue with having just a few candidates funded by a very few, very rich, you know, group of individuals. So the capture is there. And we really need to take it seriously. Because I think we're headed the wrong route. And, you know, you could say, oh, Macron, he's young, he's good looking, and, you know, but he's not young, he's super old, you know. He's like Margaret Thatcher with 100 years more in just a business suit. Because he really doesn't have an understanding of the world, right? And he's funded by people who are very happy to destroy social standards. And this is our reality. I mean, it's actually quite bad. It's gonna end. We're gonna end up in France, just like in Italy, with fascists. Yeah, and this is becoming a reality around the world. So we'd better really think about who funds our politicians.
Tom?
I know this is. Sorry?
Would I make a different point?
You absolutely could, but should we see if anyone else has? And the points are absolutely relevant, but let's try to address the man there returning to. Does anyone else have something they'd like to say about, are we going to do it differently this time?
No, go ahead. Yeah,
I'd like to kind of respond in a slightly indirect way, because one of the things I think that we always need to remember is just how historically weird the concept of climate is. Up to only about 200 years ago, there wasn't anything called climate. There was weather. It was actually about a particular perception through place. Now, clearly, through the extension of sciences and meteorology, the technologies of world collections of currents and wind and temperature, we've got a technology which allows us to have and to represent diagrammatically, photographically, even through WYSI computer-generated images, a particular global viewpoint. But it seems to me that for an awful lot of people, that global viewpoint is only one. Often, I think, much more local and rooted perceptions, which may often be about, one may be about perceptions of weather, which may well contribute to lay skepticisms about overarching systems. But also it seems to me that it is the horizon of political imagination that is one of the things that many politicians respond to and contribute to, which is often precisely always pushing the global and the international to the side. And so I think that one of the things, the real challenge is not just that kind of, will they act upon this kind of analysis and be prepared to make that kind of investment. It's whether there can be a sufficient shift in people's political horizons and people's political priorities to actually make that come to the fore of a lot of politicians and policymakers. And I'm not wildly confident at the moment. But I think that issue of cultural and communicative shift is at the core of what we're wrestling with. It's not just about the data.
Go on.
I'll just, I think one of the problems is that, yes, there is corruption, there is great inequality, but one of the big problems is short-termism, obviously. And politicians are elected locally to represent local people, and their local environment in comparison to the global environment, and their mandate is to increase the living standards or whatever, employment, whatever it is, which long term they would obviously increase by putting in low carbon solutions to everything. But it pays for each politician to wait for another country, another politician to do it first until it becomes much cheaper and much easier for them to do it. So as a result, everybody is waiting, and only the politicians who have the mandate from the people demanding change, and that's historically been in places like Denmark, Germany, Scandinavia, where richer and they're demanding change faster. And now it's happening in China as well. I think it's quite interesting in a one-party state where there's all kinds of terrible things going on to people's human rights. It's been local pollution issues, environmental issues that have got people really riled up and campaigning to actually get policy change put in place. And I think that's what will happen. It's down to us to demand this from our politicians. And the voice is getting louder, definitely. And things are getting cheaper, you know, it's getting cheaper, so it makes more sense.
So I'd like to really agree about the scale of issues that as we become this ever more connected world, both electronically and in real flow of goods and back and forth across the world, where they're produced, where they're consumed, and so on, then clearly, if we're concerned about the future environmental prosperity, if you like, of the planet, then more and more decisions have to be made at a larger scale, increasingly global scale, and thinking about the long-term consequences of these actions. And by and large, the way I perceive it as a jobbing scientist is that we, by and large, don't have adequate institutions and processes in place to achieve this with teeth at a global level. But I understand it's all going to be okay now as we leave the European Union, because we're going to be a true global force for universal activity.
Thomas, do you have any? No. Okay. There was one point you want to make quickly.
There was one point. I think it's really important to recognise that politicians or policymakers at every level, they're not homogenous. They, you know, this is exactly the point Guy is making. I think that they reflect communities, they reflect electorates, they reflect needs, and places demand different kinds of solutions to their problems. It's really hard in India to argue for a low-carbon economy. It's really hard because there's 500,000 people who work in the coal industry and probably close to 1 million who indirectly depend on it. And then there's a question of energy sovereignty. So it's not just rational interests, it's not just about jobs, it's about energy sovereignty in India. So trying to argue to rapidly get out of the coal industry is very, very hard. It makes absolute sense to stay there. The same is true with soya production. Soya production pays for welfare across much of South America. So how are you going to talk about getting out of that? So the solutions to these problems are not simple. And I think it is not just that politicians don't listen. I think it's that the answers, the political answers, are not easy to produce.
So I said I wanted us to finish on time. I also want to achieve the ambition of getting you through more than 3 questions in the course of the session. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 questions and another one if someone wants to, and then panellists can choose to answer which ones they want. So we'll have both of those questions.
Yes, hello there. I'm John Cossum, a concerned citizen. I'm a big fan of science and the way that science is done, and data, and also campaigning. And I've been a campaigner like yourself for various different things. But another way of getting things changed is to do direct action and protest. And, well, a group of young people called Rising Up have got really fed up of us oldies, and on the 31st of October are declaring an extinction rebellion against the British government. And they're rising up against the British government, and midway through November they're going to do a civil disobedience campaign, the aim of which is to replicate what happened with the suffragettes and the racially segregated buses in Alabama, and get people in prison, protesters in prison. Because when you get people in prison, the issues get onto the front pages of the newspapers, which we need climate change in the news every day. We need this stuff on the front pages of the newspapers every day. And one way to get popular people, I mean, not everybody likes people going to prison, and a lot of people say it's wrong that lorry surfers go to prison, and it actually helps the cause. So I'm wondering whether you think that direct action non-violent direct action has a part to play, and would you support the Extinction Rebellion?
Yes, yeah, let's get them both, then we can chat.
Yeah, I don't know if this is working. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm quite a big believer that education is an extremely powerful tool, and we haven't mentioned it that much for very young children or for teenagers. And I was wondering, how do you feel that is represented currently, and how could that be changed to ensure that the future is sustainable and people are educated properly about these issues, especially, well, for children?
Okay, so we have education or direct action. Take your choice, give us your answer. Thomas, any thoughts? You don't have to. There's nothing so good as a panellist who says move on.
So as for education, I would go back to the comment that you were making about politicians. Often there's lots of people who have been educated to some level at least about climate change, and they have decided not to do much about it. And indeed, being met with more facts has made some people more anti-climate change than knowing it, because for a whole series of social reasons and the inconvenience of it. So so facts, and for that matter direct action, work at certain points in time when you're at social cusps, the way I see it, and that at the right facts, the right actions at the right time can tip you from a situation where the status quo was being maintained, but that a fairly substantial proportion of people didn't think the status quo was a good idea any longer. Just like when people stopped wearing fur coats in Britain, but if you'd had the same adverts 40 years earlier, they wouldn't have worked, because people weren't ready to give up their fur coats at that point. So, yeah, that's me.
Definitely we need more education for young children, especially in the issues. They should know that Earth systems are all connected, and that and what climate change could do, what it's really sad. I mean, I have young children, and, you know, every single thing that they're really excited about, I'm, you know, well, obviously, you know, there's only 3 of those left in the world, and it's, you know, one of my great joys has always been scuba diving, and I know that by the time my children are old enough to scuba dive, well, what's the bloody point, frankly? So that's personally a really sad thing, not to be able to kind of give that joy on. In terms of direct action, yes, I applaud anybody who's, you know, we all have our own battles and challenges in life, and yeah, you know, the people that make changes, they're the heroes of today. You know, if they'll put themselves in prison for the rest of us, you know, fantastic.
So direct action, same. I feel like we all have our personal styles, and I think anything helps. Anything. When it comes to education, I would tend to think. I know a lot of. So I was brought up in Hong Kong, and of course surrounded by the financial sector, who I found very ignorant. And I thought, yeah, maybe a lot more scientific education would help. But really, what I question is our values. And so for me, it's about, you know, teaching values, and that can be done. And I think that's our model of success. You know, our model of success. And I think the fur coat example is a pretty good example, because I mean, you're a techie idiot if you walk around with a fur coat nowadays, right? When it used to represent, you know, having achieved in life, or, you know, etc. So I think it's really about changing our values. I don't know, are you familiar with this study that was done in the States by psychologists and game theorists? They looked at the level of morality, like if you're a moral person according to your wealth. And they tested several game theories and situations, you know, in order to be able to not have a bias. So they looked at whether people would, well, you can look at they had different methodologies in order to not have too much of a bias. And the results were striking. There was an article in the French press that basically summed it up. And it said, the richer you are, the more immoral you are. And it's now proven. And I was like, wow, I've got to read that. And that's my intuition of, you know, of what I see around I know a few good rich people. Seriously, I know a lot of rich people. Most of them are not amazing from a personal point of view. And a few of them are exceptional, and you would hope that they make up for the others. But in terms of number, no, they are totally outnumbered. So they looked at, it's a part of the story is values. And they try to understand, you know, so what is it? What is that connection between wealth, how much money you have, and your absence of morality, your absence of having very strong moral grounds? And they found it's the education of values, that for them it was acceptable to cheat and lie in order to succeed. And because success was materialistic, really, pretty much, that opened up the route for things that we would labelize as not moral. So I thought that's it. Our battle is values. Yeah, we have to teach our kids values. We have to teach them respect, tolerance, altruistic, behavior, and that can be done because there's a great scientist, an artificial intelligence scientist from Mexico who worked on that, and she showed that you can really change the way from a very, very early age. You can teach cooperation versus individualism, And it works. It makes us much better persons. So really, I think scientific basis and values insist on that.
So I'm going to answer on the direct action. I've spent a lot of my early reporting career hanging around with climate activists, which was an awful lot of fun. There's one Copenhagen. There were thousands of activists at the Copenhagen Climate Summit in 2008. And I knew this made me really proud to be British, because there's this British scheme amongst them. In fact, I was really good friends with the guy who later cream-pied Rupert Murdoch, which proved to be awkward in the office when that happened. So I was hanging around with these guys. I knew they'd got something planned. They weren't going to tell me. But I also knew that it had to be something they could get past the police, because we were all searching it out, and they introduced these laws where they could arrest you if they thought that you were going to commit a crime in the future. The big day of the climate summit was happening, and we knew the route the march was going to be happening in, and they were pretty certain where they were going to get kettled and sort of tear gassed by the Danish police. And so we all went round. And we got kettled just about where they thought, which was on 3 sides, and then there was a canal over here. We were there a couple of hours, and then they thought, right, now's the time to strike. And I knew that they'd all got these big rucksacks, there were about 8 of them. And they got the rucksacks out, and they connected together these blow-up mattresses, and they formed this pontoon bridge, and it was bloody freezing, bear in mind, it was sort of December. They formed this pontoon bridge that slowly went across the canal to break the kettle, and obviously it was completely futile because the police had enough time to get around. But the thing that made me, I wanted to sort of sing "Land of Hope and Glory" when this happened. As they got to the front of this pontoon bridge, approached the other side. Bear in mind they were pretty much all vegans. One of them said, "Send forward the sausages." And the police dogs were there, and they sent forward the sausages, and they threw the sausages at the police dogs, and they made this completely pointless sprint to get into the Copenhagen Climate Conference. And it was a heck of a lot of fun. It was completely pointless. The whole thing.
The Danish police, are they the ones that dress up like little toy soldiers?
Yeah. My impression was the Danish police were they had a lot more powers. They tear gassed and pepper sprayed a lot more freely than the British police, but they enjoyed their job less, I think. The British police really enjoyed getting in there. But there was one of them who'd been doing this for ages, and he'd started on CND, and he'd gone through all of these things. And he was the only one who sort of said to me, I just really bloody love this. And I hung around with him at the G8 protests or G20 protests in London, and they'd positioned us by the Excel Centre, but about a mile away. You could just about see the Excel Centre. And he was like, bugger this. And so we tried to sneak around the back. And again, it was largely pointless, but it was good fun. We sort of snuck around. Eventually the police found us. And the police arrested us, and they said, well, what are your names? And we didn't give our names, but then they said, give us your wallet, or I just gave him a name. But this guy said, I'm not giving him a name. He said, right, give us your wallet. And apparently they had the power to take your wallet. And they opened up the wallet, and he hadn't got anything in it, except they took out this tiny, tiny piece of paper and slowly unfolded it. And it said, fuck the police. It was brilliant. But I don't think they did much of any note. I think direct action can work. I think it needs a really clear goal. And if their goal was just to say, climate change is bad, hurrah, you've already won. And I agree, you could be right. You could be right that getting this stuff on the front page of the newspapers is what's required. But it's slightly, you're pushing at an open door, and once the door's open, no one's quite sure what to do. It's such a complex... It wasn't like the people inside the Copenhagen Climate Summit weren't trying this torturous process to get a completely unsatisfactory agreement that didn't work, but they were trying. So I think it needs to be clear what it is that you want to achieve. And on this, I think we already know, but we're not able to do it. Have you guys got any thoughts?
NVDA have done it, didn't think it was wildly successful. I don't think you fill the jails, and I don't actually think it's newsworthy. I think you get one small report and very little else, sadly. I think you've got to find ways of things which are much more spectacular if you're actually going to manage it. In terms of education, I think one of the kind of curious things is that one of the absolutely universal child formation things, it seems to me, at a very early age, often preschool, is dinosaurs. And actually, the idea of extinction has become something which is universally realised. But it seems to me that actually that's one area where one could actually build upon. But I actually think it's about education for citizenship and the notions of what you might be able to affect to change things, rather than having a sophisticated ability to analyse particular bits of STEM subjects.
Any thoughts, or should we get some more questions?
Shall I say something very
Yeah.
quick? Well, just on advocacy, I think there's a phenomenal amount of research that shows that advocacy matters, that advocacy makes a difference, that voice is important. I'm not sure necessarily it says direct action matters. I think it's an empirical question whether it matters rather than a principled question. But I think what you describe is actually it's actually about young people rather than the issue of climate change. And I think what you're pointing to is that young people in the UK don't feel they're listened to, probably not on anything. Climate change is one of those issues, but not on lots and lots of issues.
The chap that came to York and did a talk on this is 20.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Great. Have we got any other questions? So we've got the lady there, and is there another one? Okay, well, we've passed 3 questions anyway, so I've done my job. I think so. I'll repeat it if not. But.
Okay. Thank you. It's working? Yes.
Yeah, that's working.
I would like to go back on the political point. Should we and how can we change our Western democratic models to make the politicians more focused on long-term issues like environmental issues instead of short-term issues like the elections?
So we need a seminar on that one. Nobody has a magic answer to that one, right? If we had it, I think we would not have the level of, we wouldn't have the politicians we have today. yet. Of course, saying that, we don't want to generalize. There are amazing politicians, right? And they help us win some cases, win some votes, some things. Some individuals are absolutely fantastic. But the majority of governments, as we see, do not pick up the challenges in a way which is satisfactory compared to the challenges that we have. If we had a lot of time, basically we could imagine that where we're headed is okay, because there are some shifts, there are some stuff that's happening, lots of stuff, especially at local level, regional level. The problem that we have is the time we have to conduct change. And that needs a radical shift. So there is a way to, I mean, you remember the term white-collar criminality, right? White-collar criminals? That's a term that was coined just after the war. So when you think of it, it's really recent that we're able to talk about white-collar crime, about fiscal responsibility. And so we're changing, obviously, the fact that Panama Papers and all these revelations have really helped us shape a different understanding of the world, reveal the extent, the scale of things, and therefore adapt our understanding to see that we really need to take individual and collective responsibility on fiscal grounds, for example, and therefore that we have been very good at opening up economic borders, but we've been very bad at opening the same borders for justice, right, to operate. And we have a real problem with just justice. I mean, that is a huge, massive problem. But there are things happening. On each individual, when you look at each individual topic, things are happening. It's just a matter of how fast they're happening, and are they happening fast enough to get us out of a huge chaos, right? And that we have an answer to. And the IPCC, but it's not just climate, right? I mean, we're focused on climate. Let's talk about, erosion of biodiversity, habitat destruction, the loss of the erosion of the dirt. There's this great book called Dirt on the erosion of our fertile soil and all of that. So the trends are just really bad. So we need to shift completely away. And there we're asking politicians, we have to ask politicians to really just say, okay, we understand how catastrophic the situation is, but the problem is that they need to believe in the catastrophe. And that's the biggest challenge. Believe in data, believe in things, when actually our minds are quite, what you call it then, paleontological. We're stuck in a grotto, kind of. We're stuck in a cave. Yeah, fear works on us. We have little understanding. It's very hard. I mean, not here, of course, but we're not very representative of society. But it's difficult for people to understand the scale of things. Our brain is not adapted for a representation of large-scale things. When we threw a bomb on Hiroshima, nobody could, even before doing it, could really get it. And Paul Otherly, the pilot of the plane, became completely mad. Not because he became mad in the sense that you had to lock him away in a psychiatric hospital, which the US Army did, because it was the only narrative that could go down for such a major guilt. He became crazy because there was too much to bear. So he was just a human being who had done something that all of a sudden was just too big to bear. And that's just our problem. Everything is just too big for our little brains. And it's too big for even the brains of our politicians, our governments. They're stuck in short term. So we need to help them by asking them constantly, do it for us, because our life is on the line. Do it and do it. And that's where mobilization of any sort, but talking, asking may bring them to really take into consideration our general interest and steer clear from the business world, because at the end of the day, I mean, I know that, we don't want to put everyone in the same bag, but at the end of the day, look at what Business Europe, do you know Business Europe, this formation? It's a group that lobbies, it's all the boss, like that's the dominant business in Europe, and that's the lobby in Brussels, and they lobby hard. There were some leaks last week. They lobby hard so that Europe will lower its ambition on climate emissions, on greenhouse gas emissions and climate ambitions. So that's the reality still of business, right? It's not in their interest. So we need to make sure that we, citizens, scientists, whatever, we outweigh the short-termism of industry or businesses which are there for profit, right? So we need to outweigh that. And that, I cannot find a better answer. I mean, maybe you've come up with a great solution.
No, I don't think I've got a solution. I wish I did. But I do think, I do think when we talk about politics, we've got to get away from talking about just politicians. I think if we, if the only face of politics was the electoral system and the politicians, life would be easier and solutions might be easier to find. So this is, when I was saying at the beginning, I think we need to think about interests, institutions and ideas, and I think here institutions are really important. So there's a lot of work that would indicate that institutions, they can be parliaments, they can be institutions of government, they can be the law, the multiple faces of the state, the bureaucracies. These don't change. These encourage conservative policy making. These are the kind of organisations where if something isn't broken, don't fix it. Those of us who are old enough will remember programmes on the UK TV, Yes Minister, where the politician made no decision whatsoever. It was actually all the bureaucracy, all the civil service, all the experts telling the politician, don't do anything, don't act. Whatever you do, don't act, don't endorse change. And there's something of the truth in that. So I think the more we need to broaden out from just focusing on politicians. And I'm really morally concerned about this as well, because when we do just focus on politicians, we start to see them as failures, and we start to adopt an anti-politics discourse, and we start to kind of want to drain the swamp, and we really think they're responsible for the disasters that we're in. And I think they are only very partially responsible. We need to look at much bigger pictures than that.
I'd like to briefly stick up politicians as well. I covered the Doha Climate Summit, which was horrific, but I hung around with Ed Davey and Greg Barker, who are our guys there. They were sincere guys trying to do a job. I don't think any of us would do a better job. To try to give you an idea of what it is that they're trying to do. So at the moment, so it's a very long-term problem, far more long-term than Brexit. It's a very hard problem, far harder than Brexit. It doesn't have a leader. Imagine if Brexit, which I think we can agree, whatever side you vote for, isn't going particularly well. Imagine if that whole process was being run by 650 MPs who didn't have parties or leaders and were trying to get a result. That is what all of the countries are trying to do with the IPCC, and it's utterly, utterly infuriating. It's a ludicrous process. It's the only process we have. And I really don't think there's some magic set of politicians who'd be doing it better.
Can I really need to...
Can we take you after Chris?
Okay. But you're still talking about multilateralism, and there's then politicians that actually still vote. So I'll have to make a point about that after Chris.
Well, I was just going to say that a rather different sort of response is that my feeling is that we need the population of the world, or as high a fraction as possible, to be healthy, secure, well-fed, not fearing for their lives in various ways, because if you are hungry, if you fear for your life, then environmental issues are not high on your priority list. And if you're in a democracy or any other political system under which the politicians are responding to their population, the politicians are going to prioritize these other things over the environment, even if, on a 50 to 100-year time horizon, getting the environment right was actually going to be as important or more important.
Okay, everyone's got who wants to speak has a very brief moment to speak, and then I'm just checking out. Do you want the results of the survey up?
We can never take a decision, yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I just want to make, sorry, because I've been hanging out way too much with politicians, obviously, over the last 13 years, and I don't let them get away with anything, to be honest, because multilateralism is difficult, especially in Trump moments, right, in Trump years, which is sabotaging anything and everything. But the thing is, now we're talking about politicians, in Europe, in national parliaments, that have the possibility they have a red and a green button, and they can choose yes or no. And when they don't go for the prohibition of glyphosate, when they could actually vote, right? When the European Commission, puts out a definition of endocrine disruptors, which is a shame, and we know they've been lobbied by the chemistry industry, etc. It's a shame, right? And they have responsibility, and we have to actually make them accountable for their acts. So every time we look at a fiscal evasion, we're talking about the thing which is actually taking away our possibility to even fund a transition to an ecological world, to actually save our climates and save our species and land and whatever. But fiscal evasion, fiscal rules in the EU can only be changed when there's a consensus. So we put out a list in France, for example, of fiscal havens. And of course, we updated it. You can put Togo or Mali. Nobody cares about that. But we don't have the Luxembourg. We don't have Malta. We don't have Ireland. We don't have the Netherlands. That's how corrupt still the system is. And that's why Frexit, Italian exit, whatever they call it, Grexit, all of that is still pending. And it's en route because we really need them to actually become very responsible for their acts. No, I mean, I could go on and on about this, and I really have been there. I spent all my days, all the time with politicians, and I think, that's why I'm like, I don't want to listen to speeches anymore from politicians. Look at what they vote. Look at what they do. Just look at what they do. That's all that counts. It's like peer reviewing. Let's just peer review them.
Briefly, these are the results of the survey that a lot of you filled in before coming here. I think we can safely say it's not a nationally representative sample with 89% of masters or PhD.
But that was the point. The point was, so thanks, Alice, for doing it. But it was quite. You had 62 respondents. The point was trying to see, can we have some sort of assessment? I thought it would be really interesting, and I think it would be great to carry this at a much bigger scale to see. Is there a difference between the perception of our future and of solutions, and where is our hope with the scientific community, broader sense, academics and so on, compared to the rest of the population? Because my intuition is that scientists are much more aware of how bad the situation is because they can stitch all these different bits of information that you have from general culture, your own research, talking with colleagues, compared to the general population. And the survey was interesting because it does look like a lot of us, as let's say cultured, educated people, share a pretty pessimistic view of the future.
We are now a minute over the time I said. Do any other panelists have anything they wish to say? Yes.
I take issue with the bottom middle point. I just think if you'd lived 100 years ago, London was full of pollution and smog. Children died early. We didn't live half as long as we do now. I do not understand why people say it's going to get worse. It's this old people mantra, everything was better in the past. That's nonsense. And I think we have proven time and time again we have got better. So I do not understand why people's perception is so poor.
Well, that's something nice and optimistic to end on.
Yeah.
Sue, do you want to come and give the closing out?
Well, I'm not going to speak for very long, you'll be glad to hear, because apart from anything else, given the results of this survey, I think we probably need to head for a drink sooner rather than later. But I have just got a number of thanks. So first of all, a huge thank you to our speakers and our panel members for a very entertaining discussion. And if I don't speak for very long, we can simply have more time to rush out and buy the books from the 3 different panel members. And I'm not having another of these events until I've written a book. But so thank you so much to everybody who's spoken today, who's participated. Thank you very much to our audience. Thank you for all your questions and involvement, and all our exhibitors. Actually, your audience participation isn't ended, so just a reminder that you will be getting a feedback form, and Alice will be very pleased if you fill it in. So please do that as well. And I've got a number of other thank yous. First to Matt and his team here at the STEM Centre. I think it's been a fantastic venue for us. Secondly, to Joan and her events team, and for showing me just what can be achieved with a pair of shoes. I'm very impressed with those ones. And I'd also like to say it's been a huge pleasure and a huge privilege to lead YESI through its first 5 years. And I'm really looking forward to the next 5 years. Well, sort of. I'm optimistic about YESI, if nothing else. And it's been a great privilege and pleasure to be at the helm of what's a very, I think, exciting and innovative organisation, but it couldn't happen without all the people who've participated in YESI projects and in YESI proposals, and most of all, without the YESI staff. We have a fantastic team in the YESI office. Rachel Junkel, our administrator, is just fantastic, and we've got Katie Privet, our research facilitator, who is just unflappable, and that's what you need to be in these circumstances. And she can bring teams of academics together. It's like herding cats, but she does it brilliantly to help our bids go forward. But I want to give a special thank you to Alice Flint, our YESI coordinator, for her organisation of this event. This could not have happened without the huge hours and effort and organisational flair that Alice has put in. She's only been in the YESI office about a year and a bit. She probably thinks it's been quite a tough year. She was packing bags at her house yesterday afternoon. And she's not only organising this event, she's organising her wedding at the same time. But mercifully, she hasn't got the two events confused at all. So, fantastic thank you to Alice. And I think we do have just a little something for Alice. So, thank you so much, Alice. I hope you notice in YESI colours. So just once again, a big thank you to all our participants today. And now let's go and have that environmentally sustainable cake and alcohol. And if it's not environmentally sustainable, well, it's cake and alcohol. So let's go and enjoy it. Thank you very much.